Dear learners, welcome back to this discussion on colonial legal history and women's place into it. Today we will continue what we were already addressing, what we were already trying to cover, and that was the entire concept of legislative reforms that had taken place during colonial India. So we began with abolition of sati, and in this session we will be discussing widow remarriage and female infanticide. You know it well, you must have read about the names of social reformers like Ishwar Chand Vidyasagar. Because Ishwar Chand Vidyasagar is famously known for his crusade, for his campaign that he led for the passage of Hindu Widow Remarriage Act 1856. In this entire campaign, that Vidyasagar was personally associated with this cause, because the Indian society at that time, it was witnessing the deplorable condition, the pathetic condition of widows, and especially upper caste widows. And the condition of widows, rather it was also the prohibition on their remarriage, which became a matter of public debate. Long before Ishwar Chand Vidyasagar initiated this campaign, the proposal of the Indian Law Commission, we discussed this in the first session of this entire week on colonial legal history, the reforms that had taken place during colonial India, and in reality, what was the impact of those reforms. So we discussed this idea that when we were discussing the codification of laws, that within the personal sphere, we had the text which were being codified, and then we also had the substantive laws coming into existence through the efforts of 4 law commissions constituted during this period. So one of the efforts taken up by the Law Commission in 1837 was to legislate on the issue of widow remarriage. So this proposal was initiated, and it was sent to different high. It was sent to the southern courts, because high courts came into existence in 1860-61 onwards. And prior to that, we had this structure where we had Supreme Courts in the presidency towns, and we also had southern courts. So the Calcutta Southern Courts and the Southern Courts in northwestern provinces actually opposed this idea. So obviously it could not culminate in reality, but then after the passage of more than 15 years, finally we had Ishwar Chand Vidyasagar, and Vidyasagar, what did he do? He had written pleas for remarriage for a number of issues. So for remarriage of Hindu widows, and then there was another major issue, that was polygamy, Kuleen polygamy which was prevalent among a particular section of the society, of the Hindu society. So abolition of Kuleen polygamy was another issue which he advocated for. And the result of these written pleas came in form of a book which was published and which was titled as Marriage of Hindu Widows. Again, now we'll go back to this idea which we discussed in the abolition of sati, that as was the case with Sati, here also we see that tradition, Shastras were invoked. And the idea was, the contestation was this only, whether Shastras permit this practice, permit the concept of remarriage for widows, or Shastras prohibit widow remarriages. So petitions were signed both in favor of widow remarriage and against it. Another very remarkable incident that had happened, that the number of petitions signed in favor of widow remarriage was comparatively less people, and the people who who were not in favor of this legislation, who were against the idea of colonial officials intervening into the private sphere, into the familial matters, and then legislating for widow remarriage. So opponents of the legislation were comparatively more, and those who favored the legislation were less. When we look at the numbers of the people who signed for the petitions, but this was the time when the British rule was gaining strength. So they developed the courage, they had this courage to go for it, and then finally this act was passed, Hindu Widow Remarriage Act 1856. However, the act could not alter the dominant public consciousness. This is also very important to note. And in the initial years, Ishwarchand Vidyasagar even paid for all the arrangements that were made for remarriages of widows. And when we the existing research in the field tells us that when we look at the women who got remarried, when we look at the widows who got remarried, what do we find? That the child widows, their presence, they had a dominant presence in comparison to the adult widows. So it again reflects this idea that how, because in case of child brides, child widows, the possibility of finding virgin widows would be more in comparison to adult widows. So we had these different patterns, which also we need to understand these patterns as well, because it is something which is not uniform, which is not very easy. When we go deep into these developments, the legislations, the impact of legislations, then we find a lot of disparities also. Now, another very important challenge was the act itself, because when we talk about widows, we started our discussion with the pathetic condition of widows, then the prohibition, the restriction on remarriage, and then finally the act was passed and it allowed for it, legislated, it created space for remarriage of widows. But then it was not only remarriage, it did not end here. There is another issue associated with it, and that was the issue relating to property. Now comes the question, and this was the question relating to widows' right to retain the property of the deceased husband, first husband, the husband who was no more, and the widow has got certain share rights in the property of the deceased husband. what to do with that property, with that right. So here also colonial officials, judges, intervened into this sphere, and we see that the restriction placed on this right led to different standpoints being adopted by Calcutta, Bombay, Madras and Allahabad High Courts as well. Because, when we enter into 1860s, we find Allahabad High Court also coming into existence. So, widow and the property of the deceased husband. This is something which is a very curious area, which we need to understand that what had happened into this area, because here what we are trying to understand in this particular module associated with colonial domain, because we started our discussion with the idea that the legacies of colonial legal system, the legacies of the colonial developments can still be found, can still be traced. And even in the post-independent period, the contemporary period, we find a lot of discussion being made on this idea of Hindu widows' right to retain property, and a number of amendments and new laws were also passed dealing this particular sphere. So coming back to the history, we see that Section 2 of the Act was much in debate, in discussion, and especially within the judicial arena, because the law was already passed. So now we had the courts, because widows' right to retain the property of the deceased husband was being challenged by the relatives of the first husband, of the deceased husband, by the heirs of the first husband, because they had this contention that, we have the right over this property. So now, obviously the cases will be coming to the court, and courts now here have this duty, this responsibility to interpret the laws, because we know it well that the interpretation of laws is the particular area which is being dealt by the judiciary. Interpretation and then obviously implementation. So here what do we see? That Section 2 says that all the rights and interests which any widow may have in her deceased husband's property, now she'll be having this interest through different ways. So maintenance, by way of maintenance, or by inheritance to her husband or to his lineal successors, or by virtue of any will or testamentary disposition. So there can be different ways conferring upon her this property. Now, without express permission to remarry, there have been a number of cases where this point was being debated, whether the widow got this permission from the deceased husband to remarry, or she did not get the permission. So the evidence were being put forward, were placed before the court. So here only a limited interest in such property with no power of alienating the same. Now what will happen? The Act says that upon her remarriage, this right shall cease and determine as if she had then died, and the next heirs of her deceased husband or other persons entitled to the property on her death shall thereupon succeed to the same. Now what is very important to note, that you'll always find in the language, in the legal language, this feature is always there. And that is why when we have classes of law, we do have this course on interpretation of laws. How do we interpret different clauses, different sections, different legal provisions, what remains between the lines, all this is very important to understand. So the ambiguity in this section was interpreted against the interest of the widows, and it turned out to be more detrimental to the interest of the widows in the regions and castes where widow remarriage was already allowed. How? Through the customary laws. So this is the turning point, because see what section 2 of Hindu Widow Remarriage Act 1856 did. It allowed for widow remarriage. It created this space. But this was not the only thing. There were other aspects associated with remarriage that also were covered under the domain of law. So one was what will happen with the property of the deceased husband. There were other also aspects such as guardianship of the children, etc. So there were castes, there were communities where widow remarriage was not an issue. It was already allowed. And not only the remarriage was, prescribed, it was there, rather the right to retain the property of the first husband, this right was also provided to the widow. Bone of contention. This resulted in one of the problematic issues. And we find that Lucy Carroll, in her work Law, Custom and Statutory Social Reform, because we had this statutory social reform and then we also were having customs going side by side. So and then it says work Law, Custom and Statutory Social Reform, Hindu Widows Remarriage Act 1856. See, because and Lucy Carroll's work is it gives us another story. It is a glimpse into the proceedings, court proceedings. How did court interpret this section? So what had happened, because see, statutory social reform was one development that had happened here in this particular issue, and then we also had customs, and these customary practices, customary laws governed people. It operated, those customs operated there in the society. So Lucy Carroll highlights the different stand adopted by the Allahabad High Court in comparison to the interpretations that were being taken up by Calcutta, Bombay and Madras High Courts. Because what has she done? She has taken judgments from these 4 high courts relating to the issue of widows' right to retain the property of the deceased husband, or will she forfeit the rights in the property of the deceased husband. And this comparative analysis reflects that Allahabad High Court did not apply section 2 to those widows where it got proved that the customary practices allowed remarriage, and therefore it did not result in the forfeiture of the rights of the widows to retain the property of the deceased husband. So Allahabad High Court took we can say a kind of favorable approach when it came to widows' right to property. Whereas what do we find? That the rest of the high courts did not acknowledge the customary position of different communities and castes. Most of the times it was the lower caste women who were allowed both to remarry and to retain the property of the first husband. So, what do we find that, when the interpretation of laws by the judiciary and implementation of laws, what do we see? That the act which on the face apparently was a very progressive reform, legislative reform, and as a result of this reform, widows got the right to retain not only the right to remarry, but also widows got the right to remarry. And then there were other provisions associated with remarriage. But when we went in depth analysis of the provisions of the act, and then how were those provisions translated in practice, how were those provisions applied in courts of law, then we found that there were a number of widows, and these widows were belonging to certain sections, certain castes, certain regions, communities, who were previously, before the passage of the act, they were allowed, not only allowed to remarry, but also allowed to retain the right in the property of the deceased husband. But after the passage of this act and after the implementation of the act, those rights were being taken away from them. So it actually proved detrimental to the interest of a majority of widows, of women. Therefore, this brings us to a very important point, that it is not only that we need to critically engage with the law. This persistent and critical engagement with any law is very important to understand its impact, to understand, its penetration into the society. Because law alone is not sufficient. We need to have bodies, a number of agencies, a number of stakeholders involved in the process of implementation of the law. And apart from these bodies, we do have society, social willingness, social, the will of the society to actually take that law. Is the society ready for this particular law? This is also very important to understand. Brief discussion on Hindu Widow Remarriage Act 1856 is understandable. Now we come to another development that had taken place, and this was female infanticide, a very sensitive issue, and which is still there in different form, because now we do not we can say we have female feticide, because now we have the technological developments and we do have advancements in the field of reproductive technologies, and therefore now we have fetuses being killed inside the womb. And census of India 2011, we had this very alarming child sex ratio from 0 to 6 years of age, the disparity between male and female sex ratio. So going back to the past, what do we see? That at that time the practice was female infanticide, and it was common among certain castes, certain groups such as Rajputs, Jats, Gujars, Ahirs, Jadejas, Jaitwas, and some Sikh groups of Kathiawad, Rajputana, Punjab and Northwest provinces. And a number of scholars have given reference of those texts, those documents highlighting the prevalence of female infanticide among certain regions and communities of the colonial past. So the first reference to female infanticide was found among Jats in Punjab, and it was made in 1857 publication by John Cave Brown, titled as Indian Infanticide, Its Origin, Progress and Suppression. So this was the work which got published in 1857 by John Cave Brown. Efforts, a number of small initiatives were being taken up, and then finally we got this Special Act of 1870, which is also known as Female Infanticide Act of 1870, which banned the practice of female infanticide. And then we do see that after the passage of few decades, the act was withdrawn. It was also found that it is also reported that the act could not turn into success. It could not fulfill the objectives as expected, and very effectively. Significantly result in relation to the suppression of the practice, because the objective was to curb it, to suppress the practice of female infanticide, and it could not produce the results as I said, that which as expected or as was the hope with the act. And how do we get to know this? It seemed evident with the census figures, because this was the time when came out, and the comments of census officials also came out, so telling us this disparity between the stated claims of the act and the reality. So what had happened, that to curb this practice, the British tried to persuade these communities, the communities where it was, the practice was found more, and different strategies were being adopted. So the persuasion was made to reduce dowry, to reduce marriage expenses, because females, young girls were considered as burden due to these social practices. And they even executed, colonial officials, they executed agreements to fulfill the purpose. However, these agreements could not turn into success. Different other types of measures were also adopted. So sometimes they tried to educate the elders, the authorities, people who were influential in the communities. Then there were awards being declared. This was another measure where male children, females, and then young infants, young females, so they were being provided with cash rewards. And then punitive measures were also accorded to those responsible for committing this crime. So what do we see? We see that different types of steps being taken up, strategies being adopted to stop the practice, to curb the practice. The implementation of the act, because this is something again which is taking us into the personal sphere, so prevent people not to commit such crime. So it required involvement of multiple stakeholders, from periodic census, then monitoring of pregnant women, midwives, role of midwives, village authorities were involved, record keeping was also done of the births, and then if infant mortalities had taken place, say for example within a week, then that also needed to be registered. Okay, so another important question is this identification. How can communities be identified where falling under the act, coming under the purview of the act? So in 1872, when the first comprehensive census came out, it was decided that communities in clans, and Janki Nair gives a reference of this, We have 40% of girls under 12 communities. These communities, these clans will be declared as guilty. And then if it is less than 12 years of age, then they would be declared as very guilty. 1880 onwards, the age of children placed under surveillance, because we see this monitoring mechanism was put in place. So this age was reduced to 6. Earlier it was 12 and then it was reduced to 6. And we still have this 0 to 6 years of age group. So we find strategies being adopted by the colonial officials to this practice of female infanticide. So I hope that this is the details of these two legal reforms are clear to you. One was in relation to widow remarriage and another one was in relation to female infanticide. Thank you.